People say money doesn't bring happiness, and I can guarantee you it brings zero happiness. There's a threshold where it's nice that you don't have to worry about paying for your mortgage or paying for your shopping. I mean, if you can get to the level of income that you don't have to worry about money, that is incredible. And I wish that everyone could have that luxury in life. But anything above that, there's not much difference. And there's always someone with a bigger boat.
This episode is brought to you by 28X. It's a free privacy-first women's health app founded by Amber Vodegel. 28X tracks a cycle, blocks symptoms, and covers over 100 health topics, from endometriosis to cancers. Everything runs on device AI, so your health data never leaves your phone. It's clinically reviewed and now available on the App Store and Google Play in the UK, with other countries coming soon. Obviously, I can't say much about the product as a man, but I was particularly impressed by the business model. The app is designed to be free forever and funded by donations. Just like the way Wikipedia operates, it's built for the 80% of women who cannot afford subscription health apps, ensuring healthcare is accessible to all. Download it at my28x.com. And now to today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to 23 Mile with me, Kayode or Today we're joined by Amber Vodegel, a serial founder who exited Pregnancy Plus to Royal Philips, and is now currently the CEO of a new health tech startup called 28X. Amber grew up in a small village in the Netherlands and started her life working in a staffing and recruitment firm before moving to London to join an advertising company. Back in 2009, she started experimenting by launching a couple of apps shortly after the App Store launch, founding Pregnancy Plus in 2012, reaching women in over 100 countries. This led to an acquisition by Royal Philips for a company that bootstrapped all the way. At the time of the deal, Pregnancy Plus already had around 12 million downloads and had won several awards. Amber didn't walk away after the deal. She continued working on Pregnancy Plus inside Philips for another few years, scaling the app to over 100 million users across many countries. After a short break, she's back in the driving seat. Amber recently announced the launch of 28X, a privacy-focused mental health hub. The company launched with £1.2 million in funding from Philips Foundation and a group of angel investors. On the show today, we'll talk about our path to launch a Pregnancy Plus without any tech or health background, what it takes to sell a bootstrap company to a global health giant, and our tips on making apps go viral. We'll also touch on our strong views on venture capital. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today. I look forward to our conversation.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for coming on, and congratulations on the recent launch. I know you've been working on 28X for a while, but you recently announced that launch. Maybe we'll start from there. How's it going so far?
Wonderful. It's hard. I mean, running a business takes a lot of energy out of you. We're making a lot of hours with the team, but we are focusing on mainly launching a new type of architecture and a very high quality app. So the first prototype is launched in the UK store. It's not the final product, but the focus is much more on very compliant, very secure app. So it's much more what's behind the scenes than in front of the scenes. And over the next few months, we're rolling out all the features until we have a finished product by June this year. And then we'll also scale internationally.
Yeah, sounds interesting. And a couple of themes you touched on there, which we'll come back to. You said it's hard, but you've been at this for so long. You're a veteran. It should be easy. But I mean, I think that's the purpose of this show, right? Maybe to let people know it's almost never easy. But let's start at the beginning. You grew up in the Netherlands. What was that like? Tell me about what it was like growing up in a small town or village.
Well, my parents came from Leiden and Amsterdam, which are the two largest cities in Holland. And in the 70s, it was the cool thing to do to move to the countryside. So my parents did as well. They wanted to have their own vegetable garden and like more of a rural life. And so I grew up in a very incredible small village, between 800 and 1200 population. It's just a couple of houses, a windmill, and a dike, and a very small school. But it gave me all, I think, the freedom to cycle everywhere and not be worried about anything. It was a very easy start to life to be brought up in such a small village. How do you say that? Yeah, it's not complicated to comprehend as a child.
Okay, very interesting. And what about your parents? Were they entrepreneurs? Or I mean, they sound to me like people were ready to just move for something they believed in. Were they entrepreneurs, or what was it like? What was their job?
Yeah, my parents were artistic. I think my mom came from an engineering background, and my dad is very creative. Always encouraged to think outside the box, which was nice. Then, age 10, my parents got divorced. My dad got hospitalized. My mother went through a very difficult stage. So I did have to grow up quite quickly when I was 10. However, I once listened to a TED talk. I think the title was The Advantage of a Bad Childhood, that I think forms you to dare to take on responsibilities in later life. Because then my parents were busy with themselves for a few years, which was absolutely normal. But that does form you, and think helped my entrepreneurial career. Although I must say, I do think entrepreneurship is something you get taught as an example by your parents, but also has to be in your genes. It is it has to fit your character.
I mean, very interesting. You talked about the TED Talk and growing up in, if I can use the word, adversity. I mean, I named this podcast 23 Miles because I believe pain forms us. You know, pain for me, running marathons, building a business. If you have a high threshold for pain, I think it actually is very suitable to entrepreneurship. So very interesting that you said that. But moving on from the small school, what was it like then going on to college? If I recall correctly, you studied, it was economics in college.
Yeah, so it was already a big transition from my primary school, where the class size was the average of 5 children. So incredibly small class sizes. I think the whole school, my whole primary school, was probably 40 kids. So all 6 years was 40 kids. One class had one child. I mean, can you imagine? So then when I went to the second school, my secondary school, there was 1,000 children. That was difficult. Everyone was much more, they grew up in cities, so they had quicker answers, they were tougher. So I had to toughen up a little bit quite quickly. But because things were happening at home, I was kind of already put in that position. But it was I did find it difficult to also be in a big school with a few thousand students. All of a sudden, it was a bit of a wake up call. And university was okay. It was tough those years for me because I came out of a difficult kind of teenage years. I was also working on the side. I had to provide my own income next to the study. So it was, I wouldn't say it was my most relaxed few years. However, when I moved to London when I was 30, my job, I ended up there in an advertising studio, and I kind of relived my student years. I did a lot of going out and partying, but it was like 10 years delayed.
Delayed gratification, another thing that really helps entrepreneurs succeed. You mentioned moving to London then. The job there, what was that trigger that got you moving from working in Netherlands to London?
Well, there was a personal reason why we moved to London. and it was initially only going to be for 6 months, but we decided to stay longer, and my partner at the time. And I ended up in Holland in a financial controller role, which is a very finance. I was responsible for budgets and management accounts. And so when I looked for a job in England, I went to East London, and then my partner at the time said he met an owner of an advertising agency and I should have a chat with him maybe. So I went for a coffee, and he said, I could actually use someone like you to help me with my management accounts and setting up everything correctly. And I said, well, I actually want to change my career. I don't want to do this. I want to do something totally different, more creative. And he said, I can, and I'm happy to hire you, but I can't pay you the salary you have. Because I was on a very good salary in Holland. So I had to cut my salary by 2/3. And I said, that's okay. I'm happy to take that. But if I'm really good at it, I want you to have a path for me to get me back on my original salary. And so we shook on that. I started very junior. My English wasn't very good. I had no idea how to function in a UK company. It was so different than in Holland. And I had no clue about advertising. The terms were new to me. The whole advertising world and the digital tracking that came with it, the cookies and the containers and the retargeting. I'd never heard of that. So it was tough. The first year, you feel like I was 30 years old, and I felt like I had to start from scratch with a very basic salary. In a fun environment, I really loved the people there, but it did feel there were 23, 24-year-olds that knew so much more. So I felt a little bit like I was almost one of the older ones there, and I was the most junior person. But I went for it, and I loved it. I loved the culture there. I loved the people I work with. I loved learning. And I must say, it was sometimes the best decision to start all over again. And salary is not the be-all and end-all. And he did keep his promise. So in a few years, I was senior strategy director there, and couldn't have built the other businesses without all the experience I got there.
Very interesting. I mean, you negotiated hard, but then the sacrifice paid off. Like you said, it led to all the other businesses. You've worked very hard for this job. You made a lot of sacrifices. At what point did you then think you wanted to start building your own business rather than progressing in, on the advertising path?
Two reasons. One was the owner of that advertising agency. He was called Simon. He was very entrepreneurial himself. He was kicked out of school when he was 16, and he set up a very successful company. And he encouraged almost everyone in the company, in the advertising agency, to set up their own businesses on the side. So it was encouraged by him. And at the same time, I had a friend in Holland who was my previous colleague at work, who wanted to set up another business on the side. And she said, can we do something together? And then we looked at websites, because they were the cool thing in the days. And I'm talking about 2007, early 2008. So we brainstormed a few ideas, and then at some point I read an article about an app store that was going to be launched in July 2008 by Apple. And it was everyone thought it was a bit gimmicky. But I don't know, somehow I thought, if we're early, maybe we can do something here. So we brainstormed ideas. She wants to do a diet app, I believe. And then I found a list online of the most profitable desktop widgets. In the old days, you had desktop widgets, and there was a list of not the most downloaded, but the most profitable ones. And I loved that list, because ultimately you want to make some money as well when you work hard. And number one was a weather widget. Number two were games like Hangman and Super Mario. And number 7 was a pregnancy widget. And I thought, that's interesting because that's a lovely space, not too competitive. And it also gives something back to society if you can educate. And my sister's a gynecologist, so I thought, no, well, that could fit. So we developed our first prototype. We launched in the store 6 months after the store was open. So we were one of the very few first developers. We had no idea. I mean, there was no backend. It was completely random. And then we were quite successful. I think we had 100,000 downloads in total.
Wow.
But because we were one of the first to launch. And then lesson number 1 is don't work with friends. So I realized that quite quickly, and I didn't think that was a good base for a long-term business. So I said, you can keep the company and I'll start over again. So I did. So I set up another company, and that was called the Smiles Factory, because I promised to give the proceeds that we made partly back to children with cleft palates.
Wow.
So we thought if we call it the Smiles Factory, it would also have a little bit of purpose. And we learned a little bit more from the first company, because you make so many mistakes the first time round. And we got a better developer. My partner at the time, he was an amazing art director, so he helped me with the graphics. And we reached 1 million downloads.
Wow.
Over the years. So that became quite quickly profitable. I did discover that I didn't have marketing budget. So if you don't have venture capital, you become super creative.
Yep.
So I thought, how can I get downloads without money? Because I couldn't pay for the downloads. And by that time, and that was 2010, there was a lot of competition. Baby Center, What to Expect. There were large, Johnson & Johnson had large apps in the store. So then because of the advertising agency where I worked, I understood the algorithms a bit better. So I spent weeks looking at the algorithm, and I figured out that the best thing you could have is that if your app name was a high ranking keyword, you would rank high automatically. So I tried to register, just call the app pregnancy. But the app stores didn't allow that because they figured it out. So then I thought, what if I add a smiley, like one of the emojis, after the word pregnancy? And somehow they weren't clever enough in those days to figure out that was like that wasn't picked up by the algorithm. So the algorithm didn't look at any of the emojis. So I named the app Pregnancy Tracker and then space smiley. And I meant that I had a hard keyword match. So when someone typed in Pregnancy Tracker, we would rank number 1 automatically.
Right.
That's what happens when you don't have money. You come up with stuff.
Very interesting. I can imagine you've acquired a couple of these over the years. So we'll come to that, because everyone now wants to develop an app, wants to build, wants to sell. But there's something you said there around building the apps. You mentioned developer. Were any of you or your friends or partners in the businesses writing the software, or did you hire developers to do that for you?
Yeah, we hired a developer. My first developer was in Holland, wasn't that strong, and I could definitely see the downside of working with someone who doesn't master the actual skill of coding beautiful apps. And then I had a friend who built an app where you can take a picture of a bird, and then it could load it. You upload the photo into your app or something, and you could then find out which bird it was. And he built that in 2 months. And I was like, how did you do that? And he said, oh, I found this amazing person in Malaysia. He's Chinese, but educated in the US. And he's wonderful. So I said, do you mind sharing that contact with me? And that's how I met my lead engineer. And I mean, he was fantastic, and couldn't have done it without him. and he was there from the start.
Very interesting. You mentioned the code name there. That's a hack around the algorithm. What other thing did you do so early? I mean, to succeed with the first app and then with Smiles Factory, with these amazing downloads. What other things did you do to achieve that more traction?
Well, even the second company, then I realized I didn't do everything right. I didn't set up the backend very properly, and so I think realizing what's not right. So we had good traction, and we were even very profitable. I think we made about, I don't know, 5 or 10,000 a month, which was amazing at the time. I was still, by the way, having a full-time job. I didn't give up my job.
Yeah.
Because I was really worried that the app wouldn't last very long, or that I just felt so. All of that work was done in the evening, alongside my full-time job. So I read a book about selling a company, and I thought, you know what, that would be amazing if you could one day exit your company, bank some money, and then I felt I was pregnant with my my oldest daughter at the time, and as a mother or expecting mother, I also then felt the urge to make sure that my daughter would have enough money to go to college, etc. So, don't know. Sometimes you have these moments in life where you feel like this is the moment, or I need to do something, and so I looked at the app and I thought, what's not good is if I ever sell this company and they look at the backend coding, they're not gonna purchase this. So it's not good enough. Legally, it wasn't, all the privacy policies, it wasn't set up correctly. So what I did is start again. And I would highly recommend, especially nowadays, do not work with legacy code. Start all over again. Take whatever is there and be proud of what you've built, but also acknowledge that sometimes it's just not good enough. So then I set up my third company in 2012. Was still in full-time employment for the first 6 months of that company, and tried to do everything right from the start. So legally, backhand, graphics, did the same trick, but I thought the emoji was a bit childish. The opportunity was still there to have the same trick to do the app name. And then we called it pregnancy space plus. So the plus was the symbol. And that was before Disney Plus and Digital Plus and all the other pluses, because the plus symbol was not something you would use, because in Google it would mean you would combine two keywords together. So it was, for SEO, a terrible name, but in the app stores it was a brilliant name.
So you were focusing on what really mattered, the ranking in the App Store. Very interesting. So, I mean, great point on setting up the company to sell. But what was the trigger for you? What did you get to that then made you leave your paid employment to go full time on the new company?
I set myself a target of amount of money I had to make every month, and plus the confidence that I would make that for the next 12 months. And when I reached that, by that time I was also gave birth to my second child. So I reached that point and I felt like now I need to take the plunge. It was a bit financially. I was confident. I didn't expect to feel so lonely in the beginning, because I loved working at the advertising agency, and it was this beautiful space where you collaborate with colleagues, and all of a sudden I was on my own in an office with a few freelancers that live all over the world, and nobody who said to me, "Oh, well done." Like, if you work in an office, there's always like a colleague or your boss that say, "Oh, thank you for your hard work," or "You've done really well." And now I was on my own leading this business, and there was nobody there that would at the end of the day say, "Oh, well done for you for working hard." So I missed the feedback. I missed the collaboration. It was a bit lonely. It took me a while to get used to that. but I didn't need external validation to feel good.
Precious. And with this new company now, that was that ran Pregnancy Plus. You mentioned one of your lessons from the previous startups, which is not to start a company with a friend. But your co-founder was the husband in this.
Yeah, so he was an amazing art director, and so I founded the third company in 2012, and he came on board a year later, and I couldn't have done the business without him. I do think I need to be. I'm always a little bit worried, or careful what I say, because he's also the father of my children, and I don't want to be misquoted on anything, because he did an amazing job in all the graphics and the direction of the business. What I think I would have done different back in those days, and I'm talking about 2013, 14. When he joined the business officially, I said that I would make him CEO, because I felt a woman couldn't be above her husband. So I thought it would be bad for our relationship if I would be the CEO and he would be working under me. So I said to him, why don't you are the CEO, you do all the networking, and I'll just do the work. So I'll be the COO. I'll just do all the app development, the customer service, the finance, the marketing, the PR, the content, like handling the app stores. I think nowadays it's absolutely normal for a woman to be the CEO and your husband to work on. I thought it would change our dynamic. So that wasn't I think it wasn't the best decision in hindsight. We got divorced later. He's still the best father ever for my children, but the work together and that conflict there didn't really work. And after we divorced, I took ownership of the company again within Philips. And I should have, I think, I should have done that better. So that's a rule. Next lesson: do not start companies with your partner.
Yeah, so that rule still stands. Thanks for sharing details there. Really appreciate it. But what was it like? Taking this company, bootstrapping, experimenting with these different attempts, and then with Pregnancy Plus. Did you get any external funding, or were you just putting in money from your paycheck into the companies?
Yes, I never took any funding. To be honest, I didn't know it existed. I've never heard of venture capital or private equity or angel investors or even grants we didn't get. So it was pretty old school. It was, you make some money, you put it back in the company, you improve the product, you make some more. So when we sold the company to Philips, we still had 98% of the shares, which was exceptional.
That is exceptional. That's phenomenal, right? You mentioned something earlier on around the creativity, which kind of traces back to, growing up on a farm and the dens you were building then. But it must have been really difficult building over these years fully bootstrapped. How did you manage to pay the team? How did you manage to price? How did you manage to run profitably for so long?
Yes, it is difficult, but it's also easier because you don't have investor pressure. You can be much more ethical. Because investors do push you to accept commercial deals that are not always in the interest of the user. And we never had to do that. So we could run the company as we thought was best. And for me, that was always about how would I feel if I'm a woman and I download this app? Do I want to see advertisement? No, I don't. So why would I put it in there? We didn't do subscriptions. We said the app is completely free for the first 3 months because women, there's a high chance you have a miscarriage in the first 3 months. And the last thing you want is a subscription to a pregnancy app when you just had a miscarriage. So we would give the app away for free for the entire first 13 weeks. And then we said there's a one-off payment of $4.99 for the next 6 months. Same price for a cup of coffee or a magazine to support the team. If we were if we had investors, we probably had to add subscriptions earlier, charge more, would have been less accessible for the 80% of society. who can't afford high subscriptions. So I was glad I could do that early on. So yes, it's hard to pay. It also means we had to outsource a lot abroad because we couldn't afford UK staff initially. Which is a shame because I'd like to support the jobs in the UK, which I'm doing with my current company now. But at the time, there was no choice. And we worked a lot with freelancers, just to say, rather than hiring someone for 5 days, we would hire someone 1 day a week, but then get the most out of the person in 1 day. And the rest was just doing a lot of the work yourself. So I would put the kids in bed at 7 o'clock and then work. So I worked in the day and then put the kids in bed at 7. And then from between 7 and 11, which is another 4 hours, I would work at least 5 days a week.
And did this continue all the way till acquisition, or was there a period where you could hire a bit more people?
We were very small when we got acquired. It was a very small team, a handful of people. So yes, it's probably also a little bit a downside that took me long to learn. I always thought if I can do it myself, why would I delegate it? So I'm maybe slightly addictive to work.
Addicted to work, addicted to pain. I think there's a kind of theme that we've seen throughout. But very interestingly, I mean, maybe just before moving on to the Philips acquisition, I saw something around very similar to what you did with the algorithm, but there was also a reframing you did, where you were talking about, maybe oral health and miscarriages to brushing teeth and pregnancy. What's the story behind that and how it caused a massive uptake in your downloads?
In total, we had 150 million women use the Pregnancy Plus app in 100 countries. Once you see tens of millions of women pass through your app and you see all the customer service tickets and you analyze what works and doesn't work, you quickly realize that the audience you think you're making the app for is actually not the audience. There's quite a big misconception. People like to make profiles of their typical customer. For example, our US audience, the average age of the first pregnancy in most states in the US is 23 years old. They're very young women. They're not highly educated. And then we were in 100 countries as well. So you see the difference in knowledge and health literacy and access to health is also so different. And then we did a lot of experiments. We had articles which said the relationship between oral health and miscarriage. There's a tiny correlation there. But then nobody clicked on that article. And then we start experimenting by saying, let's reduce the reading level to a level of average reading age 9 years old, which is, by the way, the average reading age in the UK and in the US at the moment. We don't know how low the reading level is, or we don't realize. So then the title became, Should I Brush My Teeth More Often in Pregnancy? And because people understood the title, they would actually read the article. And that's when I realized that we had a big role to play. So there is amazing content out there. For example, in the UK, the NHS, the website is phenomenal. Every article on there is written with care and attention and is clinically validated. But ultimately, for most people, it's a daunting place to visit. It's a white pages with black letters. It's a little bit boring, maybe even for some people. So what they do is they flock to TikTok for their health information because it's a short video, it's entertaining. But there's a lot of misinformation, and misinformation travels 6 times faster than evidence. So what the role became quite quickly apparent for an app developer is that you have a role there to educate all these women. We provide, in most countries, we serve 70% of the first-time moms.
Wow.
So your role to provide clinically validated content like the NHS, but equally engaging like TikTok, that is what you're doing. And then you can see the difference you can also make. If you say to 2 million women a day, please don't drink any alcohol while you're pregnant, that's a lot more healthy mums and babies. And more, it's important we educate, because many people are lonelier than ever. They don't talk to their sisters and mums anymore about health. They spend a lot of time on their own, in sometimes just never leaving the house, or spending time in digital environments. And basic health literacy has fallen so much. So we need to really, there's a role for us to educate women on what is healthy and what isn't healthy. Don't optimize for the affluent users in our society. Trust me, the top 5% of society, they have Aura rings and watch trackers and vitamin stacks and consultation subscriptions. We do not need to optimize for that group. There's enough for them. But if we focus on the 80% of society, it's much more rewarding, but also you can make a real difference, and you can have a massive user base. But you do need to look into the actual needs of that, the 80%.
Just to confirm as well, that theme right from the beginning when you started Smiles Factory about giving back. You mentioned giving out the app for free for the first 3 months, but then charging £4.99. Is that £4.99 a month, or just £4.99 lump sum? Flat fee for 6 months.
That was at the time before I sold to Philips. £4.99, one-off forever.
And you were able to run a company profitably for that 6-year period there.
Yes, because we would sometimes convert up to 30% of our users to pay for the next 6 months. So the conversion was incredibly high. I think the average was about 15%. So there were countries where we only had 3% conversion, but others had 35% conversion. So that was how. If you look now, Pregnancy Plus has between 30,000 and 40,000 new downloads every day.
Wow.
So if you convert that times 15% or 10% even, that is a lot of profit you can make.
That is impressive. And then all of this led to awards. You were one of the number one health apps. Were you just running this company that was reaching millions? Were you just running this from home with a small team, or did you have any operations in other countries at a point?
We had customer service all over the world, because I had a rule that I wanted everyone who emailed us to get a personal answer within 12 to 24 hours. Well, at least within 24 hours, but ideally 12 hours. So we had customer service everywhere, and we had local doctors that would validate the content.
Around 2016, I think 2018, after 6 years, you got acquired by Philips. How did that conversation start in the first place?
I at some point the app got quite big, and I got worried. I was worried about hacks and data breaches. If you have so many users on your servers, it gets quite. I would lay awake at night thinking, what happens if, even though we did everything we could in compliance, we were very well rated and also very secure, but still it's a massive responsibility. Then you have all the legal issues in over 100 countries. There's a lot of different, because you're close to being a medical app. We didn't diagnose, but you're bordering on providing information that affects people. So we had to be super careful how we positioned everything, and the rules were different for every country. So that became intense. So at some point I thought, you know what, I might need to sell the company and accept my limitations again. This is as far as I could take it myself, and now for the next stage, I need a partner. So we got Ernst & Young involved to help us with a roadshow for 6 months to get either venture capital or an acquisition. And as part of that, I thought it would be the right moment to attract some sponsors. And as I was Dutch myself, I thought Philips would make a very good sponsor because they had breast pumps and baby monitors and a beautiful range for babies called Philips Avent. So I went over to their offices and I presented there the sponsorship deck. And they then said, we can always be your sponsor, but how about an acquisition? And I was totally not prepared for that. And I said, well, you have to be quick because the company will be sold the next 6 months. So if you can do this in 6 months, then I can bring you in. And because we already hired EY and there were other companies interested as well, it got this hype of like, who's going to purchase us, which helped. And Philips was wonderful. They turned it around in 6 months. And the company was, acquired by Philips, which was the best choice ever because they were incredibly good to us. And we scaled the product to become the largest pregnancy app worldwide. And couldn't have done it without them.
When you're doing the basics right, the best things happen when you least expect, right? But, the deal details were not announced for this. Are you able to share the details of the acquisition?
Well, EY was wonderful. I couldn't have done it without them because they said you need to be super careful to just have monetary earn-out metrics. So what they did was, because when you sell the company, you get part in cash on day one and part is earn-out over a few years. And because you don't know how the company evolves and what strategies might be necessary and sometimes even pivot your business, they said don't just focus on monthly active users and returns. Also have some earn-out metrics for knowledge sharing. For example, how Philips can better run their own apps. So they were really good at framing the earn-out that made it so dynamic that no matter how we pivoted the business, we could still get our earn-out targets. Which made it much more relaxed because otherwise you just focus on the money and you're no longer focused on the products or the user or the quality. And the other thing that we did was we negotiated our own space. So we had a space within the Philips office that we had our own printers, our own artwork, we had our own plants, our own coffee machine. So it didn't feel like we became Philips from day one. We were the little startup within the Philips building. And over those 3 years, we became more Philips-fied.
Slowly.
And we had an integration manager who helped us with all the difficult, because we would do our budgets in Xero on a spreadsheet, and they wanted in Sage, which is if I had to do that all myself, I would have been very distracted from running the business. But the integration manager that Philips provided would take my spreadsheet and then enter it into Sage for me. Or the coffee chats that I have with my staff, he then changed them to, like, what do you call them? Those
appraisals and 180, or all of the systems.
We filled it all in nicely in a form. I mean, if I had to do all that, I could have run the business. So he took away all the administrative tasks for me, which was wonderful.
Very interesting. And then financially for you, was this rewarding, great validation for, I don't know, maybe 10 years of work? What was it like for you financially?
Yeah, it was an 8-figure number. So that was incredible. Of course, I never expected that. I can't disclose the amount because we agreed not to do that.
Okay.
But it's life-changing. And the one thing I learned is that it's really nice to be financially independent. But we were already financially independent before we sold the company. But also I woke up, so you get money transferred into your bank account and you wake up the next day. and that this is what the entire world has told you is life is about, that you have the success and the money, and then you realize nothing changed. You're still insecure about your next meeting. You still have relationship issues. If anything, you get people contacting you saying if you can maybe financially support them. I started feeling guilty about why I earn so much money and the rest of society is working equally hard and didn't get that. So I didn't even feel like buying anything. I felt guilty more than anything. And what you often see as well, that these life-changing events also have an effect. So I got divorced 6 months later because all the tensions came out. And also maybe because I became financially independent. So I felt I could stand on my own feet. There are multiple reasons. There's never one reason. So it was tough, that part. Money, as always, when people say money doesn't bring happiness, and I can guarantee you it brings zero happiness. There's a threshold where it's nice that you don't have to worry about paying for your mortgage or paying for your shopping. I mean, if you can get to the level of income that you don't have to worry about money, that is incredible. And I wish that everyone could have that luxury in life. But anything above that, there's not much difference. And there's always someone with a bigger boat.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I think useful advice for a lot of entrepreneurs building and still at the early stages of building their businesses. You mentioned earlier on that Ria Phillips was an excellent partner to you. But then how was the time, running Pregnancy Plus from within a company? Did you have more resources for marketing? What changed? What changed from, scraping by over the years to then having all the resources? What was that like?
Well, two things. Well, there's hundreds of things change, but there's two things to point out. One was it's working within a larger company slows you down. All of a sudden, every supplier had to be onboarded through an official supplier approval process. Everything has to be documented. There's many more meetings with stakeholders. So you're going from a speedboat to a freight ship. So you're slowing down from day one. That's hard, but you have to. There's no other way to operate that business then. On the other hand, all of Philips opened doors that we could never have opened. Connections with Medicaid in the US, access to conferences, but also connections in lower middle income countries, amazing engineers. We could scale the team. There was more money for marketing and content and professionalizing a lot of our modules. So opening, they really took it to the next level because there were more funds. We could even, I think the first few years we ran at a loss. So the investments were a lot more that they brought in than we would be profitable. But ultimately, then the company became much more profitable in the long term. So they could take that risk. I could never have. I would never have the courage to be loss making for 1 or 2 years to then really step up to the next stage. I think I wasn't cut out for that in those years. But Philips, of course, could take that risk.
Amazing. And but at what point, it sounds like, you had all this passion, you did all the work by yourself, had this amazing acquisition, stayed back. But at what point did you feel like you had to, come out, take a step back, if I can put it that way, from the baby that you created?
Few things, because I went through personal transition myself, so I did some soul searching, and as I said, I got divorced, and I had a very difficult, abusive relationship after that, and I just thought, listen, I think everyone gets in some point in their life to look back and say, listen, what have I done right and what have I done wrong? And I've figured out there was quite a few things in my own personality that I could do better. So I felt I wanted to take some time. At the same time, I reached a point where I achieved everything I wanted to achieve at Pregnancy Plus. And I also wanted to give growth opportunities for the people underneath me. Some people go really impressive and they did such a good job that I also felt if I leave, someone else can take the CEO role, and then someone else who's a project manager can become the COO. So everyone can move up one tier. And I thought that would be good. Leaders know how to create more leaders and also know when to step down. And I think it was my time at some point to step down and give the opportunity to the next generation. Yeah, left in 23, took a year out in 24 because, trust me, I needed a year to reset myself. It's been like, just like you can't run one marathon after another. You need to regain your energy. So I spent a year getting myself together and then started the company I'm running now, 28X. That year was important because it gave me some better overview if you step back about what's important next. So yeah.
It sounds like your team in Pregnancy Plus were lucky to have you as a leader who really cared about the women you were serving, who cared about the teams. Yeah, they were lucky to have you. Yeah, 28X. Before we get into that now, maybe just talking about that break in between. When you left, did you think that was it and you were done and you could retire, or you knew deep within you you were always going to do something else?
No, I thought I was going to retire. I think people around me knew I was going to do something else because they know I'm secretly an ADHDer. Never got diagnosed, but I'm sure all good entrepreneurs have some level of ADHD. Otherwise, you won't want to do it. But for me, I thought I was going to retire and play tennis and look after the kids and just take it easy, do some board roles and consultancy work. But then my current partner, he said, "Are you sure you don't want to do another one?" And that started to itch. And then I read a book called Moral Ambition from a Dutch historicus, a writer who said the biggest waste of our generation is a waste of talent. Our cleverest minds are working on dopamine triggers, optimization, and Facebook feeds and TikTok algorithms, while we should be working on important topics like climate change and cancers. And so I thought, what could I give back and still have fun? And that's why I came up with 28X, to revisit the consumer health phase, because the one thing that I think we can do better is make software for the 80%. So currently, most consumer apps that are successful are backed by a lot of money from commercial investors that want to see a 10, 20x return. The problem there is if you have large apps in consumer health, so gaming is something else. I mean, that's a different world. But if you have consumer health, really important topics like mental health or cancer care or diabetes or pregnancy or period tracking, every pound you put in there, they want money back. And the only way you can recoup that money is by subscriptions or by selling or sharing data with advertisers. And then you have got an employer benefit models. Well, none of those three work for people because 80% can't afford a subscription, not even the $5 a month, because they all say, oh, it's only £5 a month. Well, it isn't. For some people, that's a lot of money. That's the difference between a meal or tampons and that they already can't afford and a subscription. Then there's the selling and sharing of data. I don't think you should ever have to make the decision to get something for free in return to share your data, because ultimately it's not right for your user. And employer benefits, they say, oh, it's free because you get it from your employer. No, it isn't. It is only free for people that work at very high-end companies. If you are the cleaning lady at the local coffee shop, trust me, there are no free health apps for you. They're just not available. It's nice when you work for Fortune 500 companies. So again, it's optimized for the top layer of society. So we thought, let's make something that's completely free, completely safe. So no surveillance, no data leaks, no hacks, no data sharing, and inclusive. So also optimized for lower reading levels, for the neurodiverse, and for minority languages, which other companies won't do because they just don't get the conversion in those languages that they want.
If you were going to describe this in, maybe the elevator pitch, what, in maybe one sentence, how will you describe 28X?
It's a women's health app that educates on 100 health topics, from cancers to endometriosis, PCOS, sleep, nutrition, but also things like cancers and domestic violence and sexual transmitted diseases. And at the core is a cycle tracker, so women can follow their cycle and their hormones throughout the month and track their symptoms. There's many of them out there. The difference here is you don't have to pay for it, and we don't have cloud servers anymore. So you can still back up your data, but on your own Google Drive or iCloud if you want. But you don't have to, because the devices are so strong nowadays that everything can be processed locally. And for the low-end devices, we'll have a similar solution, but we haven't built that yet. I don't know if you've heard of cold storage.
Yes.
That is like you back up the computer on a separate device that nobody can access. It's a little bit like that. It's a cold app. There's no connectivity to the cloud, unless you want to open it, and then you can say, I want to share this data with my GP or with my Oura Ring or with Apple Health. You can decide where your data goes, but it is not by default duplicated and stored on a cloud server for any company or government to access.
That sounds really good. I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of a woman. It means they can feel free to search and consume the information and put in information knowing that it is confined to their own device.
Exactly, yeah, and safe and free. But if it works, I also pledge to make the backend open source for mental health and for diabetes and cancer care, because it should also be there for men, not just women. I'm starting there because I'm good at women's health. Because I believe cold apps should be the future. Mass surveillance is going to come, whether we like it or not, because one person with a good large language model can do a lot of harm in the future. And I think we need to protect the public when it comes to health, because it will be used against you. Ultimately, these companies will optimize for commercial success. And if you declare all your health issues to your free language model, it comes at a price. So we want to provide those apps that you can use and you can feel you've got a place where it's safe. So that's my gift back to society. And we will work on a model like Wikipedia. So we ask the 1% of users to help donate to make the app free, or keep the app free. So we will rely on some user donations and some partnerships and philanthropic funding. But our costs are super low because we have no cloud servers. So whether we serve the app to 1 user or 100 million, there's no incremental cost when we scale. So there's no transactional cost because we have no backend.
This is very interesting, but you've answered the next question I had, which was, how do you manage to keep it free? But to your point, this is around, it's the wiki model, something that is of great value to society, and then you get in top 1% to pay for it. Very impressive. Maybe just to ask, how did you, what over the years drove you to this, I would say, more philanthropic model of software?
Because the more you talk to users and you understand what your real user base is, the more you can see how unfair the system is. And maybe it takes an exited founder who has no personal interest anymore in making personal wealth, sets you free. in a way that you can then think what could really benefit society. Because ultimately, one day I'm going to be hopefully 80 years old, and then you look back on your life, you can't take any money with you. So you want to be proud of the tiny little things you've tried to do to help society, because ultimately it would be great if we all contribute a little bit to a better future. I don't think we can make a dent in the universe, but I think if we all try to do one thing well, there could potentially be billions of amazing contributions. So it's life maybe, and the freedom to be able to give back. And I do encourage everyone who reached financial independence to do not waste it on just playing golf and tennis. Try to, even if it's for your local community, do something to make life for others slightly better.
And we've had many lessons over the 1 hour. We've been talking about building a company, about going viral. This lesson now is literally about life itself. Thank you so much for that. You touched on AI briefly there around the issues that we're likely to see: mass surveillance, impact on hiring. But are you seeing any benefits from AI on how you're building this company now compared to what you did 20 years ago?
Oh yeah, it's changed completely. Previously, when you upload an app to a store and you did some clever marketing, you could get traction. I believe last year there were 85% more apps uploaded to the App Store. Everyone with Claude can build an app in 7 or 8 minutes. I mean, with the agency that my co-founder owns, a large agency, we literally build apps in 7 minutes. So you can upload them, and that means now, unfortunately as well, if I want to do an app update, it takes a month before we get the next update. But yes, you can build anything super quick. So it's not about the software anymore. It's about compliance. Like we got the highest rating with Orca ever, at 92%, which is an independent body that looks at the health quality of and the quality and security of health apps. To get that rating, that's something you can't do with Claude quickly. You need to go through lots of processes in order to get that. We did studies with the NHS, which takes months with underserved users with different types of demographics. So to do a high quality app, it still takes long. It's not about the app; it's about every thought and every step of the way in how that is built. And then the distribution is harder. It's much harder nowadays. So you need to have connections. Network is the most important thing in this new world. You need to be able to personally know an app store manager, ideally, to get a conversation going, to get feedback from that app store manager on how to improve your app to be classed for featuring. So you need those conversations. It's not a guarantee they give you that, but they can give you direction. But how do you get access to someone? We integrate with a lot of platforms, but that's built on me having over 300 conversations with all kinds of companies that I say, how can we team up? How can we work together? With my first app, there was none of that. We never had those relationships. So the new world is all about network. Yes, you can build something quick, but the go-to-market and the network effect, that is next level. And then things are going to change. I actually believe that there's a big opportunity for people to build local things again. A good friend of mine, his son is 10 years old, and he built a mobile game all by himself, an app, like a really cool game to play. And I mean, it's incredible that a 10-year-old can do that now with software. And now he's inviting all his friends from school to join me to play the game. And then that school then invites now other schools to also join that. So I can see a world where kids build their own apps and they monetize that with tiny mini transactions. And then the entire city where he lives plays his game, because it's much more fun to play that with local kids than that you play against kids in, I don't know, Indonesia and Brazil on a large console that's paid for by a massive commercial company. Maybe these local for locals become how you can make money, but that's because you know the people and they invite friends, or maybe a local newsletter again will give you these opportunities. So the network is so much more important. So maybe we we're still building a global app, but I think the future is going to be much more local for local.
Very interesting. I mean, like, so what I'm hearing now is AI is making it quicker to build apps, but also making it more difficult for apps to be able to break out. You know, you need.
Oh yeah, the competition is incredible.
I mean, maybe the good, like you said, I mean, one point from what you made is AI is going to force us to become more human, to talk to each other more. So let's see how that goes. Yeah, I've really thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you. We could go on and on, but I will just wrap up with a few quick fire questions.
I've got one request. When we will launch the app over the next year in the stores, so look for 28X, download it, recommend it. It's free and it's safe. I really would love support from the community. And if anyone wants to get involved, then just reach out on LinkedIn. But make sure it's not an AI written message.
So yes, and a few quick fire questions. You've talked a lot about reading. You know, you read an article, you started your first app business almost 20 years ago. You read another book after you'd retired, and now we are with 28X. If there's one book you recommend to entrepreneurs, what will it be?
Well, that answer is different for every area of my career. But at the moment, I love the book Moral Ambition by Rutger Bregman, just because everything else you can see a podcast on, or listen to a podcast, or see a YouTube video about how to set things up, Claude or business. But this is about what you believe in, and I think that lasts longer. So I would encourage people to read that book.
Well, thanks a lot. What's one word that describes your experience with entrepreneurship?
Oh, energy.
Not stop. Keep running. I like the energy. You know, keep running.
Energy to look after your staff. Energy to find the best people. Energy to be obsessed about your customers. The energy to show up every day.
Energy to give back as well, like you said. And then the last one, you've talked a lot about starting a business, you know, on the side. Do you recommend entrepreneurs to always to start a business with a side hustle, or should they focus and go all in?
It's a question of, it's a luxury question. So I did some volunteering for the King's Trust with with entrepreneurs from less fortunate backgrounds that they don't have much network or funds. And they always said to me, like, but how can I do this? And then my answer is always, stop watching TV. Keep your job in the day. Do this in the evening. Get some traction. Set yourself a goal of how much you want to earn before you give up your job. There is enough time. There is enough time. But you need to prioritize it. So you do not have to give up your job in the day. Maybe you need to scale back to 4 days. Maybe you want 1 day there. But if you really, do not take too much risk unless you're super certain, but you don't want to end up in massive debt that you have to overcome later. So I would recommend you keep your daytime job and run it alongside it. But yeah, TV is the dopamine, what they call it. They say TV is the, gosh, it's like a drug for the masses.
TV and social media now.
Yeah.
You know, by the way, the last advice you gave there around not giving up your job and building a side hustle. I wish I had this advice 6 years ago. I left my investment banking job for something I thought was definitely going to work, and I lost everything in it. So, you know, thank you for sharing that.
But it's not the answer people want to hear.
It's not what they want to hear. People want to hear, just go for it, take the risk. You can always, no, don't. I tell people now, I am the perfect example. It's taken me 6 years. I have not recovered financially. So I'm a perfect example of what you talk about. Thank you so much. I had an absolute blast speaking with you, and I wish you all the very best with 28X. And, hopefully you get time to relax and watch a bit more TV and have time with the family now.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the open and honest conversation. And I hope that we can inspire a few other entrepreneurs to do the right thing.
Absolutely. And build the right way. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.